Welcome to the Perspective Podcast, where we embrace open dialogue from different perspectives about entrepreneurship, relationships, and education.
And this open dialogue is needed, especially today, as we live in a Twitter finger society where everyone seems to care more about getting their point across than they are about hearing the other person's perspective.
If you're ready to grow your business, your relationships, and your personal development, stick with us here at the Perspective Podcast, because sometimes in life, to get to the next level, you just need a different perspective.
If I look like what I've been through, I'd be roadkill. Tell me off of the pavement, I'm reaching from the...
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Perspective Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mouzon. I got T here with me. Say what's up, T.
What's going on, family?
Hope everybody's doing well. We're back, guys, giving you another week of some more perspectives, some more in-depth conversation, some more hearing T and I go back and forth, right? But it's always good. Again, we appreciate everyone that's listening. Again, feel free to subscribe to the podcast. Now that we've added this video component, feel free to like it. Send this out to people, share this with people as you see it, because again, we want to bring you more perspectives, more conversations on having these perspectives that potentially can change your life and really give you just a different view of things that are maybe common or not so common out there. Mm-hmm. So again, we're here with another week. We got a good topic here. T and I have been kind of bouncing this topic off each other for a few weeks now, and it's just something that we think would be an interesting conversation, so we wanted to have it with you guys. And specifically, it's talking about the usage of humor. Mm-hmm. Right, and I'm gonna let T kind of break down like how we got to this place and having this conversation, but we think it's going to be very interesting for a lot of you to really identify some of these areas and get a chance to uncover maybe how you use humor and how humor is linked to success. Yeah. How it's linked to depression, how it's linked to just overall kind of mindset. So that's what we want to dive into, and we think that there's going to be a few different kind of angles at this. So T, jump right in, man. How did we get to this place? Like, kind of talk to me about and talk to the people about kind of where we got here.
Yeah, man. I mean, actually, it's funny enough. I give credit where it's due. My wife kind of brought this topic up around humor, and we were just having a conversation, the bedside chat, and she said something to the effect of, like, I wonder if people that use a lot of humor are more sad or happy, right? Like, it's something of that nature kind of came out of it. Or maybe I asked her that question based on something she said. I can't remember exactly. So then I kind of went down a mental rabbit hole of, well, I know Robin Williams is really funny, but committed suicide. My wife is a chef, and Chris, you being a chef as well, right? Anthony Bourdain, right? Like, my house is filled with unknown reservations, or whatever it's called, right? Whatever the show is called, but he committed suicide, right? And then I started thinking people like Kevin Hart and, Richard Pryor. My dad used to watch Richard Pryor back in the day. Dave Chappelle, I love Dave Chappelle. And I started thinking about like all of these people. And in some way you can almost tie like dark past or rough struggles to, Tyler Perry talks about writing plays, right? When he was at his depressed state, making people laugh, kind of come out of it. And I kind of fell on the side of, well, I think people that use humor, while there are some that use it to cover, I do think that generally speaking, people that are using humor are genuinely more happy, right? And then that's when I brought it to you. And your perspective was, I'll let you say your perspective.
Absolutely. Mine was the other side. I actually thought that, people that tend to lean into humor and use a lot of humor, it actually stems from more pain. Like, they actually have more pain, more darker moments, more things that are inside of them that hurt them more than is actually making them happy and causing them to just be joyful and use humor. I think it's the opposite. And a lot of those people that you named, again, as you look at it, from the outside looking in, because we don't actually know these people.
Know them, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But from the outside looking in, it looks like they're incredibly happy and that they use humor to make others happy. But talk about Kevin Hart. One of his shows, stand-ups, was "Laugh at My Pain," right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a big deal when I think that people, or they underestimate that, painful moments and painful parts of your life, in order to sometimes overcome them and get through them, some people use humor.
Yeah. And okay, so that's perfect setup. So that kind of led me down, like, obviously we're like, well, we got to have an episode about this, right? Because we have different viewpoints. So we started studying, kind of going down the rabbit hole, right? And I actually found a really cool study. Make sure I got this right. This is going to be by, I think it's Rob Martin. So Rob Martin, and he had a study, and it was around, like, are there different types of humor? Well, there were different types of humor that him and his students identified. And then there was a direct correlation from this study of certain types of humor actually directly correlated with depression, while others directly correlated with happier, more productive lives. So what we found out very early on in this Perspective podcast was that we were both right, which is typically, right, the answer, right? Like, that's the whole point. There is no right or wrong. There is your perspective, your truth that you're living in and that you create, and then someone else's truth that they create, right? We know that, we see that every day, especially from a political standpoint, right? But there's 4 types of humor. So the first one was affiliative humor. So now this was humor that had a tendency to share humor with others, tell jokes and funny stories, make others laugh, use humor to facilitate relationships, put others at ease. All right. So that's pretty straightforward, right? This is your person that's coming in, making everybody feel good, happy. Amen. It's like everybody's like, man, that guy's a riot or that gal's a riot. And just everybody feels good about it, right? So then that was the first one. The second one was self-enhancing humor. Tendency to maintain a humorous outlook on life, even when not with others, okay? Use humor to cope with stress, cheer oneself up with humor. These are people that will drop a fork and be like, haha, they'll laugh no matter what, right? Like, nobody needs to be in the room. They'll laugh. They may pick a booger and sling it or something stupid, right? Like, you know what I mean? They're going to laugh at it. Something may happen. They're like, oh, I'm a klutz, right? And they use humor no matter what, just to keep themselves upbeat. Then you have the third type. So those 2 are considered positive. Now you have 2 negative types of humor. The first being aggressive humor. This is a tendency to use humor to disparage, put down, manipulate others, ridicule them, offensive humor, potentially use sexist and or racist jokes. Okay, we all know about those type of people, right? I don't think I need to define what that sounds like. And then self-defeating humor, the tendency to amuse others at one's own expense. Self-disparaging humor, laughing along with others when being ridiculed or teased, using humor to hide one's true feelings from their own selves and others. All right, so this one right here in the study was the one that directly tied, number 4 here, self-defeating humor, to depression. The 2 positives were directly tied to a better life, right? And so why do we want to bring this topic up, right? We, on this Perspective podcast, we're always talking about you as an individual being better. And we talk about better in the world through your development, whether you're going to go out there and be an entrepreneur that creates a product, service or what have you, or helping other people, whether you're trying to be the best husband, wife, on the job. I guess that is a job, right? Yeah. In the house. Right. We could say that, right? I think me and Chris would agree. Exactly. Or whether you're trying to be the best employee, helping somebody else build their vision and your vision being a part of that. It's good to evaluate where you are. Are you actually depressing yourself potentially, right? Or are you not using the right type of humor? And these could be like unconscious roadblocks. And Chris, I'm actually, I want to pass it back to you because you talked about when we were just right before we started, how this humor kind of plays out a little bit here. So I want to, share that with the folks.
No, absolutely. Like I was, as we were kind of going through this study and going through this little quiz, and we might attach this quiz in the show notes or something.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Give you guys the ability to do it. But it kind of came up where I was ranking in all of them. And one of the lowest ones was that self-defeating humor, right? I'm in one of the lowest percentiles. And that was just like my lowest score out of all of them. And I tied that back to, as we were talking, I tied that back to being like a child. I was the butt of the jokes, right? Like in a lot of my social circles, I remember this growing up as I was doing this, it all pops into your mind, right? About all the areas. that you either use humor, you've seen humor used. And I remember that like I was always like the fat kid, right? I was always like the pudgy kid, right? So like I would get that type of, I'd be the butt of the jokes. And I played sports, so I was always like the fat kid that played sports too. So like, when it came time to run sprints, like I was
They're like, I know who's coming
exactly
in last.
right. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was always like, second to last, or third to last, or last. You know what I mean? Like it was always it. And I used it like, it just is what it is, right? I've had teammates that would make fun. And then, right, like we're Perspective Podcast, right? So this is gonna be transparent, right? I was a chronic bedwetter as a kid, so like spending the night at like kids' houses. Like I remember going to a summer camp, maybe in like first grade or something like that, and like a kid found out that I wet the bed, and it was like this big deal, right? Like he wets the bed, and so like you start to like, I don't know what happens, and it'd be cool to like have like a psychiatrist or someone
yes sort through this,
yeah, right, like how that plays out. But it just, again, just knowing as I was growing up how humor was used like towards me, right? Like it was used to make fun of me. It was used, and again, we're kids, how malicious it was, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like they're probably not thinking of it that way, but how I received it is I took this as like, man, like I'm not gonna like this doesn't feel good, so I'm definitely not gonna do this to other people. I'm definitely not gonna
do it to myself.
do it to myself. Like this is not
yeah.
how. And so now as an adult, like I'm so far away from that. Like I never make fun of people, and I'm saying never, and I'm thinking like, do I ever? Like, has it ever?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, as
yeah,
I'm saying it, but like I really don't find that type of humor funny. I don't find putting someone down as funny. I don't find putting myself down as a way of humor to be funny. None of those things amuse me, and I choose not to do them. But I know 100% it stemmed from childhood, right? It stemmed from the environments I was in and how humor was used in my social settings.
Now, so then, we're talking our scores, right? Like, so now the two positive ones, you were obviously higher than the lower, but they weren't very high at all, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What was your two top scores again? I mean, the two positive scores?
So the affiliative was 36 and the self-enhancing was 33.
Okay. So let me give my scores now, right? So let me go back to it. Hold on, I got it saved. All right. My scores were so I was affiliate, I was 53. Right, which was an 86 percentile. Or were you giving your percentile?
No, that was the score.
The score,
like,
okay.
Yeah.
So then I was 53 affiliative. That's 86 percentile, and then I was 46 self-enhancing, which was an 87th percentile.
Wow.
And then I was 16 and 16 aggressive, and then 16 self-defeating.
Yeah.
Right. So as you can see, and as you start talking about this, it's funny because me and my wife were kind of talking about how, as and some people are going to watch this that are African-American, Black, whatever you want to call ourselves, or, in other cultures, but we were kind of having a conversation about how to matriculate through the corporate culture, and the different, like whether we want to admit it or not, things that you have to kind of do. And I always kind of was like, man, I seem to kind of fit in pretty well. Like there's sometimes I had some situations and I didn't realize I use humor to facilitate relationships.
Sure.
Right? Like I constantly am like joking. If I need to do a self, kind of defeating joke, it's fine. Like it's not like I'm 16 on it. So I'm not like, in the top percentile or anything, but like I use humor constantly to diffuse situations, to get people to like me, like these different things. And I've seen it work in the corporate world, right? Like even I think about times even in school with teachers, right? Like I would have a teacher be like to my dad, like, your son is great. I just need him to stop talking so much in class and focus, right? But then the teacher would always look out for me because I was like the guy who would kind of be not necessarily lively. Like I wasn't that guy. I wasn't like the Kevin Hart, right? I wasn't going around like with one-liners, but I use humor strategically for facilitation. Because coming back to childhood, I never felt like I always felt like I was like the average guy. right? Like I was the epitome of average in my mind,
Sure.
right? Like, like nobody was really picking on me. I was like kind of too big for that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like nobody was picking on me, but I wasn't like the most popular. Like I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I know Terell. People on the basketball team. Then I got better at basketball. Then you started getting a little bit more hype and all that. But I realized two things that always got me like more noticed, being able to articulate myself effectively and using humor while doing so, especially when I started like more speaking at 15 in church, preaching and different things of that nature. Once I realized that, it was a game changer.
You used it forever.
It was used forever. It's like my secret sauce,
Yeah.
right? Like I go to interviews and stuff, and if I can make the interviewer laugh, it's on. Like, you know what I mean?
Real quick, T, do you think that like now that's conscious? Like before it might have been unconscious, but now like is that a conscious thing? Like going into a meeting, you're like, I'm gonna make this guy laugh. Like I know that I'm gonna use this humor.
I think it's more. No, I think it's so quick now. Yeah. I'm more conscious of. I want to say appropriate, right? Because a lot of the humor that I actually like, transparency is the edgy stuff. Not like the let's talk about, little chubby Chris or something, right? Like, or chubby Terell, because I was chubby too, coming up, right? Like, it wasn't that. It was more or less like I like the Austin Powers, the slapstick, the it's just stupid, like, you know what I mean, kind of humor, like scary movies. Like I watch all of them, right? Like, with the Wayans brothers. So I love that stuff.
It's so weird, man. Like as we talk about this, because I've just changed so much in my life, right? Like I'm thinking back on times where like, yeah, absolutely. Like I would use humor, right? Like to kind of like, again, as we're having these conversations, all of this stuff is just kind of coming up in my mind. So like even after that childhood of, getting made fun of a bit more or whatever the case is, I still like maybe in my like early 20s, mid 20s, like I was a very jovial, like
yes, in college, right? We were roommates, like
very
for
so.
one of the years, I think.
Yeah. Like so that's a memory I do have. Like I was very jovial and just talking about
I want to tell my favorite joke. Oh my God, I want to tell my favorite one.
Go ahead.
But it's no, it's not good. No, it's not good. We keep it up.
It's not good.
That's not good. No.
That was one of the questions on the little.
I know, and I tell myself
when it's inappropriate, do you still tell the joke regardless? Tell it.
It's something you said that was just so hilarious, and I was so mad at you, but it was so funny later on. We'll talk it offline. Maybe we'll do it after hours or something. We'll do one of those. That's funny. It's like my favorite college memory too.
And maybe it's the same thing I'm thinking of. Is it when DG when he benched me? Was it something in practice?
Oh no,
So I got benched my junior year, like towards the end of the year, because in practice I was joking around too much. Like literally, I was joking around too much, and I said something that was a joke about, I don't know. It was probably bad timing or something about, right? Like I don't know, butt sex or something. I don't know. It was right. I'm 21, right? Like, it was something stupid.
That's the Chris I know.
Exactly, right? That was happening, and to the point that like I guess it was so out of control that I had to get benched, right? Like I didn't play like the last like few games of the year because I wasn't serious enough about the game. And so again, thinking back through these things, I'm not that way anymore. Now I don't know if like that was a direct reflection of childhood or something like that, or maybe it's just me continuing to grow. Right, when I step into my business world and like got into this kind of.
Do you feel like what you do now because what you do now is like day to day, it's very serious.
Exactly.
Right, like it truly is serious. Like we're talking about some of the things that nobody wants to talk about, right? Like not being here anymore, money while you're here, etc. People are funny. Right. Do you feel like you maybe felt like you needed to adjust subconsciously or consciously to be seen as more serious, in that area?
It's quite possible, right? It's quite possible being in the financial services space, like you said, when we're talking money, there's a part of what I do that I have to be serious because most people think it's a joke, right?
That's a difference. Okay.
You can't do both sides, right? Like It's funny. I was just having this conversation with another person that I'm coaching in the business, where you want some of that tension in a meeting, right? Like when I'm sitting down with a potential client or someone that we're talking over their money, I want there to be a bit of tension. I want them to feel a bit of hurt. I don't want them to laugh off the fact that they have no savings. I don't want them to laugh off the fact that they know they should be, but they don't. Like, I don't want that. So I don't feed into that. Now, again, I've been doing this for some time. So maybe that is where it came from. Maybe I am naturally more serious to counter people that are using humor in their financial life.
Yeah,
Funny, right?
That's very, and wow, that's interesting as we kind of go down this, and as people, as the people are listening, I want you to think about, like, in your profession, like in your world, are you using humor maybe to cover, right? Or are you not using humor because you feel like it's not appropriate in the setting? Right. And then maybe there can be some ebbs and flows. Like in my world, most of what I've done is predominantly high sales, customer experience type stuff, like some transactional, some a little bit longer of a sales process. So I need to get rid of tension, right? Like, I need to get rid of tension because a lot of what I've sold has been impulsive. So I need it flowing, friendly, happy, jovial, so that I can remove all of your barriers so you can make that decision in that moment. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't want you sitting there thinking about it for 20, 30, 40 days, if you will, or minutes even. I need you to make that decision. So,
and that's funny that you would say that, because again, as I'm thinking of it, I probably have morphed just according to the careers that I've been in. I've been able to adapt. And this is what makes you special, right? Because you can adapt in many different situations and you understand how to do it. And I think I have shown that I can do the same thing. When I was working restaurants, when I was working at the Cheesecake Factory, right? Like, I was super jovial because you have to be like, you have to be, right? Like, I couldn't be this like hardcore, this guy, because I'm dealing with servers that don't want to be there. Right? Like that's not their main job. Like, that's not the thing they want to do, but they got to go take care of guests. I got, people that when they get hangry, right? Like when they really, the guests hangry, like, you can't diffuse it with anything other than food or humor, right? Those are the only things to diffuse it with, right? And so I learned that I had to be that way. So I was the goofball. I was a little bit goofier than I needed to be, to just make it through and get the best shift and have the best day, and make the best.
Because people are coming for experiences.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you want to present in the restaurant business, right? You want to present the best experience. You don't know if they were there for a wedding, graduation, or they're sad, right? They're coming to get away, right? Like, me and my wife, we have agreed we eat our problems away, right? Like, it's like the deeper the problem, the more we're going to go spend on a meal. Like, that's just, we've directly correlated our bank accounts to it. So we figured it out, Chris. We figured some stuff out on our side.
At least right? Like, that's what I always tell people. No judgment. At least you know.
Yes, I know. Like, we could tie thousands of dollars to food and very sad times in our life that we just go get it from food. Period. But that's very interesting. And so as we go back and we talk about people that's now, how they're using it, I think it's more of an awareness, right? Like, obviously it starts with an awareness, right? And then, like you said, we'll send the link here. Do we constantly morph? Because that was another thing the study said. Is it genetic, right? Like, it's obviously there's a lot of studies and science that says genetics is tied to depression, right? There's some correlations there that a lot of people believe, whether we do or not, that's fine. But there's some science that backs that theory, if you will. But then it's environmental, right? Like, do people need to use humor because of the environment that they're in to cope? And there's actually another thing. It's a different study, but it's called the sad clown paradox. Right? It's a sad clown paradox. And essentially what it says is it's like you have a clown that's sad, but he's a clown. Like, it's like a paradox. It's like, hold up, you should be happy. Clowns bring joy, et cetera, but you're sad. And so you're using humor to just diffuse it all, to try to just make it through the day. Like, that's my summary, my take on it. And I wonder, if you go back to the Robin Williams of the world, and just people that seem to always be clowning when it doesn't even seem like it's an appropriate time, right, for the joke, right? Like, I'll be very transparent. When something negative happens at work, I laugh. I laugh, right? Or we could be talking about something serious and I'm like, okay. Like, and it's the worst response, like when someone's really trying to be serious at times.
I'm sure your wife has
oh, she hates
side.
it. Oh my gosh, she hates. So you laughing? No, I'm not really laughing. Like, it's gotten to a point now where I have to say, I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. Right. I'm laughing because I'm trying to cope with what you just said or what just happened, right? Like, and I realized that I did it. Like, people would come to me like, Terell, somebody just stole one of our cars. I'm like, what? Like, I like chuckle. It's a chuckle. It's a quick chuckle. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, so what do you mean somebody stole my car? Like, they stole it? Or like, you just don't know where it went? They out too long on the test drive? Like, I will use humor, build it in while I'm even questioning, just to process, because when I go down, sometimes it's hard to, come back up. So I've used humor to try to keep me in the moment, if that makes sense, right? Without getting lost. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It also kind of goes to the thing, if you're thinking about it again, consciously or unconsciously, that what would your normal reaction be, right? Like, if and is that appropriate, right? Like, that is also another place that maybe you've been thinking, or you've been, I don't want to say programmed, but right, like you've adapted to like what I really want to say or how I really want to react to
is beep,
exactly
beep.
Right. But I know I can't because the circumstances, the people. So instead, like you said, I'm going to use this humor as something that just pops in, so I don't really have to say how I'm really thinking or react the way that I would want to react. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Well, it's funny because when I first had my first like general manager position, right? Like, I remember one of the early compliments that I got was when people was observed, because what they do is when you open I was new and I opened a new store. So it was like all of corporate was there, literally there. And it was bananas, bro. I'm talking about crazy. And me, I take everything in stride. Like, that's one of my, I just naturally, like, each problem is its own. I don't let it compound too much, right? When it starts compounding with me, I need to take a break. Like, I know, like, it's compounding, I'm about to flip out, right? Like, in my head, like, I know me, like, I know I'm about to lose it. But I'm going through, and I remember they came to me and they're like, you are so calm. They're like, you're like a duck on water. Above, you're cool, calm, collected. Underneath, you're like, like, we know you have to be doing this, right? Because we're watching you move. And I think it was an anchor for me as my leadership that said, always stay calm. Right. I didn't realize what I was doing because it was too many problems to get like lost in emotion. Like, it was too many things happening, right? You got a new store, crazy, new market, corporate, literally sitting in your office watching everything you type and put in, right? Every pencil mark you make and write, whatever. Crazy. And I think it was one of those like, well, how do I stay there? Mm-hmm. How do I consistently seem like everything's okay? And humor, my old friend, always helped me feel like I can keep that equilibrium there. Mm-hmm. So when somebody brings something to me, I chuckle. Right. And it totally throws them off, which is like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, it's good, man. Like, all right, let's solve the problem. Right. And then we can go into it. So is it good or bad? I don't know. But I found it to be it's my lube to life, if you will, right? It's the oil in that machine that keeps everything else kind of lubed. And I feel like I'm not a good conversationalist. Like, I realize, I'm good in having conversations, but I'm not good at small talk. There we go. I'm not good at small talk. Like, small talk sucks for me. Like, I just hate we've had this conversation before. Yeah. I hate small talk. I'm very specific, but one way I get through small talk is through jokes, right? Till we get to the serious stuff.
So again, like, this goes again back to that question of like, is this healthy, right? Like, and not good or bad. Like,
Yeah.
is this healthy? Like, would it be healthier in your relationships to be like, I hate small talk? So, right? Like, as soon as someone small talks you a bit, like, no expression, because I know people like that too,
Yeah.
right? That like, and so when we're thinking of this humor, it's like, how good of a lube is this? Like, is this that something that's covering up our true self? Like,
Yeah.
is this like, should we keep going down this path, or at some point should we just be direct and be like, I get you. I'm not big on small talk, just so you know, right? Like, and then, like, you'll put people on notice right away, so they like, you don't have to change your facial expression, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to change. You don't have to use humor because it's really not something you vibe with. It's not you.
Can't even process, like, I'm more of the guy that would just bring up something more serious. Or like so I was terrible like trying to date before I met my wife. Just FYI, right? So like we're in college. So I realized even the same way in college, like so I meet a girl out. Hey, what's your name? Blah, blah, blah. Right. We go through the process, right? It's normal. That's basic. Okay. You got to get there. Then there's this awkward moment of now what do we talk about?
Right.
So of course, being the kind of serious guy that I can be at times, are very straightforward. I'm like, hey, I'm here for college. I'm going to study, do this. I'm trying to do. What are you trying to do? And then if their response was like, I don't know yet, then I'm like, well, why don't you know? What are you thinking about doing? Have you considered? And then it's just like, she's like, walk away.
That would definitely make you bad at dating. It's like it was always this interrogation of like life goals.
That's exactly, it was not meant to be an interrogation, but if you don't have anything to say, then my philosophy is I'm going to ask questions.
Right.
I'm going to just ask questions. But in questions, there you go. Some people interpret questions as interrogation, right? And then it's like, well, where do we go from here? So luckily for my wife, so people are like, well, how'd you get your wife? We were playing pool, right? It was a group of people. We're all playing pool, right? I think she's cute. I think she think I'm cute. You know, the whole deal.
Right.
And then we were like, hey, this TV show is coming on. Oh, I like that show. Oh, I like that show. We all went to watch the show. After the show ended, we had something to talk about. We just talked about the show, and then the rest was history. Then we were able to build on the other stuff. But had it just been generic, it would have been a struggle. We may have not even been where we are today.
How much would you have considered using humor in the awkward moments?
Well, I did. Well, when we first were meeting, there was a lot of humor going on from my side. That's what got the attention when we were playing pool. Again, I was using humor to facilitate these relationships. You see what I'm saying? Like it was, me, LD, and her roommates or whatever, and we're going through this whole thing, and I'm the jovial kind of like funny guy, but not like too crazy, but I'm facilitating, which allowed everybody to feel comfortable coming back to my dorm room to watch the show.
Right.
Because we could all went to our own rooms to watch the show where we normally watch the show at, right? And so that's where humor got me at least to the place where we could talk about something. But in the average meet you at the mall, meet you at the gym, those situations are much more difficult,
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, right, and this is the conversation that we're having on the podcast today, is really just about how we're using humor to facilitate the things we want in our life, or is this getting away from the things we should, right, be dealing with in our life? And that's where it gets like that slippery slope of saying like, hey, you used it to get a wife, right? You used it to get some attention that sparked the conversation that led to, right, getting a wife. We talked about already in the job format, right? Is this appropriate? Well, how would I want to react? Okay, I'm going to react this way, and I'm going to use some humor in there because I think it'll come off better, give me a better result, yada, yada. But when we go down that path of like, should I really be using humor, or do I really feel differently and I really want to talk about how I feel, but I don't think it's acceptable, so I'm not going to be true to myself. I'm just going to kind of gloss over this humor. That's when it goes down that slippery slope. And that's what we were talking about with, the comedians or the Robin Williams, the people that commit suicide, and you would never know. It's because they're using that humor, that comedy to really just
to deflect.
To
to shield.
That's
it. or to make people feel they don't feel good enough that people love them or like them, so they defeat themselves, right? So that's the self-defeating humor, and that's the one that's tied directly to depression.
Right.
Now, the one that I thought was interesting, which was the aggressive humor,
Uh-huh.
no correlation to no correlation to good or bad. It was pretty much like, if you're an a-hole, you're an a-hole. Right. Essentially, that's what the study found.
Yeah, let me read that one, because the aggressive humor, it said people who are high on aggressive humor often use humor to tease, put down, or manipulate other people. Although they may be very witty, their humor tends to involve ridicule or sarcasm. They like to tell racist or sexist jokes, not concerned about how their humor might be hurtful to others. And so making fun of others is a way they try to enhance their own self-esteem. But it says their levels of self-esteem and emotional well-being are no higher or lower than the average person, right? So like, this person you may not be struggling with self-esteem, but yet you just put people down in your, right?
You enjoy putting people down.
Right, it's your way of humor. It says on the back end though, it says those who are low in this humor style, right, like from their ranking, those who are low tend to have more satisfactory relationships.
Yep. And I'm low, and you were low too. Yeah. I think yours was what?
It was. I think it was a higher percentile. Like, so I was in the 20. My number was 24. It put me in the 33rd percentile.
And I was 16.
Right.
And I was in the, what's that?
A lower percentile than 33rd, probably.
Well, mine doesn't even have a percentile.
Oh yeah, so yours is super low.
It's right? Super low. I think eighth. Sorry, I was in the 8% percentile.
Wow. It's weird. I got low on all the scores. I didn't even get like high on any of the scores. So again,
you don't use humor at all.
There must be like, and again, like I said, as I'm thinking and reflecting back, maybe I've just morphed into this person that doesn't use humor.
You know, it's funny. It's funny. Like, even I use the phrase, it's funny. Like, if you know, like, I even know, like, that is one of my phrases, right? Like, I think about it now.
It's true. It is.
I use it's funny.
You use it a lot, actually.
I use it a lot. I do. See, it's so triggering for me. I'm telling you, I'm subconsciously telling you, this is about to be funny.
Right.
Like, bring your thing down. Like, you're going to enjoy this. Like, That's how subconscious has gotten for me. Like, I never even thought about it to just this moment.
Wow. Look at that. Uncovering.
Now I'm going to be thinking about it every time. You messed up my phrasing. It's funny. You know, now we're going to go through the podcast. Everybody's going to be like, Terell does say it's funny a lot, right?
Now everyone's going to notice it. But now you can correct it and start to notice.
But maybe I like it.
But maybe it's covering up something. See? Maybe it's covering up something subconsciously that you're not paying attention to that could help you, right? Overcome, maybe have a different, this is breaking news. I don't know if I'm supposed to break it, right?
No.
Transitioning in your career, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit of maybe you might need a different leadership style. Maybe there's something here on the humor side that maybe you want to pay attention to. So, right?
Could be, yeah.
It's good to know.
It's. I think it's. How do I want to say? It's the one you said something earlier about, both of us, and we feel like we both have this, is the ability to be able to adapt, right? Like, when people ask me, what's your management style? I say flexible. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. I don't know what team I'm going to get.
Exactly.
And I may need to be
into the locker room. I'll know what coach
I don't know what this is. Yeah. Like, you're asking me to tell you exactly what I'm going to do with a company I never worked for, a team I've never seen, people I've never known, I don't even know existed, and you're going to tell me how I'm going to walk in and what I'm going to do. Right. That's absurd. Like, that's absurd. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they need coaching, motivation, relaxation. I don't know. So let me get in. I know that's probably not the greatest answer, but when I get in, I say, look, I'm going to be able to get to this goal. This is how I've gotten to the goal before. Let me get in and figure out how to get to that goal, right? With the next team, if you will.
If anything, a better way that you can answer that question, because I know you, is like, your management style is people first, right? That's
100%.
Like, and that you might need to say that to some people, because other managers, they're not
people first. Yeah, they're numbers first.
They're numbers first, right? Yeah. They're operations first, or systems first, or something. So like that becomes like who you are. You're the people first manager. But yeah, absolutely, staying flexible. And sometimes they need that humor. Sometimes they need straightforward. Sometimes they need coaching, like you said. And that again, is the ability to adapt. And I think that goes back to, again, just how we're talking about using humor. Just again, we started by just saying, we look at this differently. I still think it comes from a lot of pain, from people that are like comedians, people that use comedy like every day, all the time, right?
Yeah, and you can hear it in their jokes too. Like, like the type of jokes that they have, they're either talking about somebody else or talking about themselves.
Exactly.
Right? Like, compared to some people who just tell stories.
Right.
Right? Like, like you can hear the difference in styles.
Exactly. And I think that's what, for all of you that are listening, that has to be something that you're thinking about. Like, how do you use this humor? Right? Like, how do you use humor in your life? Is it just to put people down and have sarcasm, right? Because again, talk to everyone that's listening that has a job, that hates their coworkers or their boss. What they develop over time is this level of sarcasm, this level of like, I can kind of put you down but joke about it, right? Because I really want to tell you about yourself, boss. Like, I really want to tell you about yourself, coworker, but I know I'll get fired. I know that won't be right, so I can't. So I'm going to use this. Like, again.
Or I don't know how to effectively do it.
Sure.
Right? And so we use humor because everybody laughs. It's kind of like I get my point across and everybody laughs so you can't say anything.
Right. That's it.
Right. And that's another, I guess, negative way, to use it. So I think this is a good point. Like, as we kind of wrap it up, it's how are you using humor? Right. Like, how are you using? Does it facilitate relationships for you, like myself? Right. Like, or are you on the opposite side where you realize, what, I'm constantly talking about myself negatively. And then I'm seeing this correlation to feeling depressed and sad. And the only way I feel like I can make people happy is to just talk bad about myself. Right. Like, how are we, and that's the two extremes, right?
But I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that other side. Like, I'm thinking of people that do struggle with their weight, right? Like, I talked about this as a child, right? Like being, getting made fun of or whatever the case is. But then sometimes subconsciously you grow up, and if you never lose that weight, you're just so used to people kind of making fun of you about it that you start making fun of yourself about it.
Yeah.
But you're actually not happy about, like, it's you're not something you're proud of. Like, you're not proud of the fact that you're overweight or that you have, eating problem or whatever it is, but you use it so that other people can't, right?
Yeah.
You've heard that saying before too, right?
It's like the Eminem thing, right? Like, I'm just gonna rap about myself. Now what are you gonna say?
Now what are you gonna say, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's more along the lines of what I think that people use it for, that go to that extreme, is it's just covering up their pain. They really aren't happy about their life, or they really aren't happy about that part of it. But instead of allowing someone else, for what's probably happened their entire life, someone else making fun of it and then them feeling hurt and then going home, they're just like, well, I'm just going to embrace it, right? Like, it's just, I'm weird, I'm this, I'm that, I'm like, laugh at me because I laugh at myself.
But you're not really laughing at yourself, right? Like, you're not really.
Exactly.
Yeah, he gonna cry in the car.
Exactly.
Like,
right? Like, you're really gonna go home and cry. That's really what you're gonna do and what you want to do. But in front of people, you're gonna put on this humor, this laugh, this show. And so that's what I think we all have to be aware of and be, make sense of in our own life. That there's always a place for humor. There's always humor can lift your spirits. It does lift your spirits, right? Like, that's one of the things that it said it in that the little thing that we were doing, the little survey, that it said, like, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling down, do you use humor to pick yourself up, right? Like, that is a way that people use it. They watch something funny, or they listen to something funny, or right, they put that funny thought back in their mind, and it helps them change their state, lift them out of it. But like I said, it's the balance, right? It's the balance of how you're using it. So,
well, I'll wrap it up, and we're both guys that are believers, and one of my favorite scriptures is Proverbs 17:22, and I was trying to reference exactly what it was, but it goes, a cheerful heart is good medicine. A cheerful heart is good medicine. And I think that's the place, right? Like, we use humor, but really what we're looking for is that cheerfulness, that joy. And it is good medicine, right? I've had some days where it was terrible, and I see something funny or somebody falls.
those are the funniest anyway. Right? Like,
I know. We're just gonna go ahead and say it, right? And I mean, and it's a slow fall, right? Like, you know, and they're not hurt, and they're laughing. That just will totally, you know, totally brighten up your day, right? But it is good medicine, and we are both advocating: laugh, be joyous, have fun, be joyful, have that cheerful heart. Just know what place it's in, and know if you, and just check it, right? Like, you know, even on this conversation today, even myself, I'm like, okay, are there moments where I overuse? Are there better ways I can use it? Or hey, maybe it's going right, and these are fine. Just keep it rocking and rolling. But what they say, to thy own self be true. Know what it is. But if you are one of those people, and Chris, we're the same. We're not like, we don't talk bad about ourselves or anything, right? Chris even more so than me, based on the numbers, right? But if you do find yourself, you go take this quiz, and we'll have it there. The link for it, it's a free quiz. You know, you don't have to give any information or anything crazy like that to us or the folks running the quiz, the study. But if you find yourself needing to use it to like make yourself look better by hurting yourself, that is something you need to evaluate. Right. And I'll leave it there. Like, that's something that you're going to have to correct, because there is a lot of evidence that says that is directly tied to depression, and especially in a COVID world that we live in now, right? You know, depression comes real easy these days, being in the house during winter. You know, some of us are in colder climates, right? And it can really sit heavy. You can't see your family, your friends. You can't go to school. Some of us can't even go to work. Right. You know what I mean? At times. And then you are speaking always. The only way to make people happy is to talk bad about yourself on your Zoom calls. It's just not a good environment for you. So that's something I will ask, you know, that you really look into for correction. So that'll be my 2 cents.
1000%. And I think that's a good way to wrap up this episode, because, you know, this is up for you guys, right? Like, again, we do this podcast so we can start to engage in conversation, hear different perspectives. So, you know, question of the day, question of the week, how are you using humor? Is it helping you build these relationships and helping you think that it's moving you forward, allowing you to adapt? Or are you covering up a part of yourself? Or are you covering up something that you really want to express, that you really want to get out, but it's too hard, or right, you feel like you'll be ridiculed even more and that'll hurt your feelings more, right? So which side are you leaning towards? Do you use humor all the time? Do you not use it often? We're curious, right? We just want to hear about your experience and your perspective with how humor is being used in your daily lives, with your family and your relationships, on your job, right? How are you using it? So that's what we want to talk about. That's what we want to hear. Feel free to hit us up, right? You know where we are, everywhere on social. Shoot us a message, send us a DM, but for sure, like and subscribe to the podcast. That way you get a chance to hear more of this, and we can also hear more of you and engage in these conversations, guys. So, because again, this is about perspective. This is about just understanding that there are many different perspectives. Which one are you going to adapt to get your life to where you want it to be? So we're signing off. T, it was a good episode, man.
This is good, man. I like this. You know, this is good. You know, shout out to Ebby for giving us an idea for an episode. You know,
that's right. We get our inspiration from our wives as much as right. Like, we might talk about them, but not talk about them. We get a lot of inspiration for these conversations from them. So shout out to our wives.
Got to get them on here, right? Everybody's probably gonna be like, "Well, why don't you guys bring them on?" I think you guys are lying at this point.
I think we have to. We have to figure out the couples episode that we can have, that we can bring them on and let them kind of dialogue and get their perspectives, probably about marriage, right? Like maybe we have like a marriage type thing and get the woman's perspective. Yeah,
oh, God.
I know, dude.
No.
We're both.
I don't know if I want that perspective again. I get it every day.
Right, we do, but maybe it's good to share with the world. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But either way, guys, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next week, we're signing off. Perspective Podcast. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Perspective Podcast. We hope this conversation made you think a bit deeper, gain some insight, or even possibly gain a brand new perspective. If you did enjoy it, do us a favor, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or anywhere else you stream. Leave a review to help more people experience these conversations and potentially change their perspective as well. And lastly, as always, T and I want you to connect with us. So follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can find us just by using our names. And there we get a chance to hear your perspective. Until next time, God bless.